2 years ago, it was like you could raise money building on Polkadot. A year ago, you could raise money just by saying Cosmos. This year, you could raise money just by saying Optimism. Next year, what is it going to be? There has been more and more requests to use the Cosmos SDK as a middleware layer. With all this tooling being built out, we kind of want to reduce the modules. And for me, it's like I want 5 chains who have a treasury or a foundation as big or bigger than the ICF that are willing to help. I mean, I think everyone's top of mind is the Stride acquisition. It's a super interesting design. I think it's a bit too early.
Welcome to the Bare Metal Podcast.
Hey everyone, and thanks for tuning back into the Bare Metal Podcast. Here's Ship the Code from Rocco X, and I have our first repeat visitor. Welcome, Marko.
Thanks for having me again. It's been amazing watching the journey of the podcast.
Welcome back. So, Buinary Builders, you guys have some interesting news that happened in 2023. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, I guess a short intro for the people who didn't watch the first one or aren't aware. I work on the Cosmos SDK as a product lead. I've been in Cosmos for a quick 5 years. Some would say that's a bit too long. I'd call it just right. So it's been a good journey. But yeah, Buinary Builders is a new entity in Cosmos. So Cosmos is, I would say, leading the effort in actual decentralization of the teams that build the various products. We all used to be at Interchain, which is a subsidiary of the ICF. And there was some drama back then, let's say, and we didn't really want to be part of it, and we just kind of wanted to just focus on the work we want to do. And I think a lot of that drama is now gone. I think a lot of it just left right around the end of 2023 as well. We're not at fault. Just because we spun out doesn't mean the drama stopped. But we spun out. And it was the initial team was the Builders program, the Interchain Builders program, which is kind of an accelerator in Cosmos, helps team go from A to Z in terms of launching a chain or other products, and the Cosmos SDK. And these two endeavors are funded by the ICF. And so you may have seen some of our community calls or some of the Twitter spaces with people from the team. The parts that are part of Buinary that aren't actually funded by the ICF are things like Numia, which is a data analytics platform, and some minor grants that we apply for that we do outside of the time we spend working underneath the ICF.
Okay, that's a pretty solid overview there. So let's dig into those different pieces. So Cosmos SDK, what does that look like now? So there's the repo. Who has sort of access? Who has write access to the repo? Is it Buinary Builders? And then other people sell PR, or is there a sort of diverse group of committers? Yeah,
so the Cosmos GitHub org actually has I want to say 150 contributors as part of the org. And they all range from Region, Agoric, Strangelove, Informal, really Jacob's in there as well from Notional. It really just varies. And it's really meant as the Cosmos SDK. Now, the people who have the approval rights and the approvals that are needed are a subset, and those are the people who work day in, day out on the Cosmos SDK. But really, any of those people can make a PR. And not only those people, but there are people who aren't part of the organization that work mostly in the fork, and we add them to the organization in order for them to just be able to work within the repo, but they still choose to work on a fork. But yeah, it's not like a subset of people have rights to a repo. It's more so the entire Cosmos ecosystem has rights to the repo. Actually, interesting fact about all Cosmos technology is unlike other organizations that have you sign a CLA when you make a contribution, the Cosmos SDK, IBC, Comet does not actually make you do it, which means that the ownership of the code that is being contributed is not actually passed on to the party that owns the code. And so meaning the developers actually own all the code. And so this is something that Bucky and Ethan and Jay really put into place early on. And we always come back to the question of should we introduce CLAs? But we believe that this is really part of the Cosmos ethos, that the developers actually own the code, and it's not like the ICF that owns the code.
So for anybody who's not a dev, CLA is a contributor license agreement. So that's something projects sometimes make you sign so that when you commit the code, it becomes property of the target organization, or like you can't actually make decisions about it. So it's pretty interesting that the SDK doesn't do that. Do you guys think that's a risk in any sense?
Yes and no. Like it's always, I think every year or every 2 years it comes up to a debate of like, maybe we should introduce it. And then we kind of have like a small debate, and it just kind of comes down to like, this is like the ethos of like Cosmos, that the developers own the code. So there has been like concerns, like every time like a new legal person comes in, they always ask about this and ask, well, why we do it this way. And then they talk about some risks, but it just feels like if someone starts coming and starts claiming code ownership and starts retracting code ownership, then I think there may be a bigger issue at play. And then this is like a form of retaliation that they're trying to take out. And so maybe I'd be very surprised if we see a day that that happens. But I don't know, in today's world, a lot of things that I say, I'd be surprised if this happens. It happens.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a pretty interesting sort of decision, and I'm sympathetic to it. I actually like that. I think it's ballsy.
Yeah.
It says, like, we're putting it out there. We're not claiming ownership of the devs code. Yeah. So who are the major contributors actually, if we think about it, like in terms of just in terms of like legal entities, like who are the big players? If I looked at how many modules or rows of code are contributed, like what would be the top 5 guys?
Yeah, I think on a day-to-day basis, so it's definitely the Cosmos SDK, if we look back at it, has been around since 2017. And so there's definitely been a fluctuation in like the developers. And so the day-to-day happens more so with the Buinary builders team, the Zondex team, and the Origitech team. And so these 3 teams work on the Cosmos SDK day in, day out. And when a security incident happens, it's usually these 3 teams with the help of potentially more teams that come in for assisting and contributing for those incidents. So those are the 3 teams, but that's not limited to the contributors. I think like the contributors of the Cosmos SDK really span a lot wider than that. But they're not there day in, day out there. Maybe like they should maybe show up a few times a week, or a few times every other week. And those people that list kind of is endless.
And do you guys, just a point of interest, do you rotate sort of duties for handling security incidents, or is it like basically the 3 teams are mostly available, so there's no sense in doing that?
Yeah, we mostly the 3 teams are available. We do there's like a subset of the team that handles like security stuff. So when something does come in or there's an audit, there's like 4 or 5 of us that start triaging, start doing testing and so on in order to fix the situation or get back to or just triage the bug. So we work quite closely with the Amulet team, and they help triage the HackerOne, bring the reports to us, and help us if needed, and then we get back to them if it's a bug, how bad of a bug is it, and so on.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So what's next for Cosmos SDK, by the way? So I think it's what's the next major version you guys are working on? 0.46 is stable now, but it's not released.
And then so 0.50 should be out. We're hoping for this week, but we want to write an edge case. So we've been testing the new IVL, the IVL refactor, our commitment structure, and there's an edge case that we observed, and we just wanted to try and recreate it. And see how hard it's been. Like we kind of had to do some fancy stuff to like get it to fire, and so we're just trying to figure it out, make sure that it's covered, and so that's the last thing that's blocking that release. And that release has a plethora of dev UX wins, and also performance improvements. And so we're really excited to get that out. And then after that, there's a whole plethora of things coming in Q4 of this year and into next year, from wrapping up the rewrite of our storage layer. So actually making storage more efficient, making it smaller on disk, making it more performant, and then to rewriting the core layer. And so the core layer, what I mean by that is within the Cosmos SDK, we have this kind of like middleware that interacts with the underlying consensus engine. And so there has been more and more requests to use the Cosmos SDK as a middleware layer. not necessarily using the modules, but also use it potentially with different consensus engines. And so we want to really enable that, make it easier to swap it out. If we actually look into the code of the Cosmos SDK, this ethos was always there. It just, back then, we weren't able to, back then when it was being developed, the use cases of where users would take the Cosmos SDK was not well known because it was still so early in crypto. And now we've learned so much. We've learned that the rollup space is taking off. We've learned that the whole EVM space into the Cosmos SDK is growing. There's different needs there, different VMs, different sorts of commitment structures, and so on. And so we really want to be able to take those learnings, adjust the software to be able to take advantage of those new endeavors and new visions for the wider blockchain ecosystem. And then, of course, we want to, so a lot of the modules that we have today, when they were being written, it was kind of like, oh, we are in a gas efficient environment. Like we don't need to worry about all these little micro optimizations and stuff unless you want extra performance. And so, but the thing there is now the SDK or the state machine does a lot of extra work that client side would be able to do. So you yourselves are building observatory, and that has its own indexing. There's Numia has its own indexing. There's other tooling that's being built around this client side stuff. Before that wasn't there, and so everyone was just putting more logic on chain in order to get the nodes to do that extra logic. And so with all this tooling being built out, we kind of want to reduce the modules to only what is needed for the state machine, and then allow clients to build more complex front ends and more complex queries, not the ones only provided by the application developer.
So in one way, let's say RPC providers might have to like do some additional indexing because it won't be part of the vanilla node that's actually just updating the state machine, because that's going to be pruned, but then they'd sort of have extra indices or like, extra, say, tables that allow them to serve queries.
Yeah, exactly. So I do think it's like, since we are like making the distinction for a full node or an archive node, that they can, we're making the distinction between a query that you need a proof for and a query that you don't need a proof for. And so if you don't need a proof, we're just storing it in a raw database. It's RocksDB, PebbleDB, or SQLite. Right. If you need a proof, then you go down to your commitment structure. And so at this layer, this is going to be a lot smaller on disk. And so, but the thing we want to really enable is users to, so you have the storage, and we want to enable users to really build complex query layers above it. So right now you have modules that you write a query for. It's perfectly fine, like it works. The computation sometimes is a bit intense because now they are gas metered, but before they weren't. But what if there wasn't a need to write queries for modules, and this query layer on top, it could be something like GraphQL, allows you to really build the query that you want based off the schema that is on disk. And so that is another thing that we're working on to enable more complex and more scalable clients.
Sort of sidestep the module in getting data out.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So these seem to be pretty interesting changes. Looking forward to seeing, investigating that. I had no idea there was so much in the pipe. Let's look at another part that you guys are, a part of your activity, which is the Builders program. So this was the program to help sort of bootstrap or help teams sort of build blockchain. So, and is it still, so when I believe you introduced last time in the episode, and the idea was to help them build app chains, right? Is that still the objective of the Builders program?
So yes and no. So it's still the objective, but it's also to get adoption for the interchain stack, which is IBC, Cosmos SDK, and Comet BFT. And so and Cosmos, I'm sorry. And so if you're using any part of that stack, and if you're only using one part of it, you can still get assistance from the Builders program. This is really to help grow the ecosystem, but also help teams who are starting out because at the end of the day, we are developers, and it's not really the wild, wild west where we can do an on-chain ICO anymore. We should bring ICOs back, but that's a different story. And so it's really a tough world to navigate venture capitalists to build a pitch deck, to build something that can actually sell, to help you find product market fit, to give you that feedback, kind of like Y Combinator-esque. And so the goal was really to give that feedback, to help with legal, to help with marketing, and also offer technical support. So if they have questions around IBC, then we ask the IBC team to come help. If they have questions about the SDK, Cosmos, and so on, then we ask the various parties if they can assist on a technical call with the team. And usually the teams are very forthcoming and willing to hop on calls with teams.
Okay, I had no idea about the sort of outreach. I'm calling it the outreach activity where you're trying to support other guys. Have you guys interacted with the Polkadot team when there was? I believe there's an IBC bridge into Polkadot. Or am I wrong?
The composable team. So we worked with them in previous capacity, but they haven't reached out for assistance. I think Composable is like more of a setup team, and they get the technical support directly from the IBC team, and they need less like BD support. So there isn't a need for them to ask the builders program more so. Mm-hmm. But there are a couple of teams that come in and want to work with the builders program, or the builders program reaches out to them and just asks, hey, what do you need help with?
So what are some interesting, let's say, users of IBC in the pipe that you guys are seeing? I don't know if you can name names, maybe it's not needed, but just like ideas that are floating around.
I mean, from my side, so the Builders program, they just started a new cohort with a bunch of teams, and so I think they announced it, or will announce it pretty soon. But from my side, teams, so Composable recently announced their ETH bridge. There's the Union guys. The Landslide guys are also working on a Avalanche-like client. Then they're also talking with other ecosystems, so on a Near, Ripple, just to name a few, on potentially how to expand IBC into those realms as well.
Okay, so we'll see. If it's going to be IBC everywhere.
Yeah, definitely.
You also
IBC
singled out Numia as another part of your activities. I'm curious about that. So I met Rafa before at Cosmoverse. I heard about what Numia does, in particular the osmosis sort of validator analysis, validator overlap analysis they were showing at Cosmoverse as well. That's how I found out about Numia, but I had no idea they were connected to you guys. So give us the skinny.
Yeah. So I mean, I mentioned this before the call, and I know you'd love for me to mention it, but Numia really started from the idea that there's no open data analytics in Cosmos. Everything's kind of behind closed doors. If you want to index data or get archived index data, you need to download this huge snapshot, and then you need to be able to understand the query language and all this stuff. And it really came about when Terra was imploding. Owner and I were at Gateway. We were sharing an apartment with with Billy, and it was just kind of we were all just talking how sad it was that we couldn't watch in real time what was happening on chain at Terra. Instead, we kind of had to wait for after the fact. And then it was kind of why don't we kind of looked around in the Cosmos ecosystem, didn't find anything that was open source truly for just the raw data. And it was just kind of should we just build it? And then so that came from that weekend, and then we came back to Berlin, and Rafa and Owner, I previously worked in a data analytics company, so Owner knew Rafa would be crazy for it, and so we asked Rafa if he wanted to build it with us, and Rafa was willing to quit the job he started 2 weeks ago in order to start that, and so he was super excited. But really what Numia evolved into was a lot more than what we thought it would. So now it's they index all the data from various chains, and then they do data analytics. So it's kind of this bringing this Web 2 world to the Web 3 world. They go to different users and basically just ask them hey, what questions do you have about your users? And what we quickly discovered was a lot of people in Web3 don't know sometimes they don't know what questions they want answered in terms of what our users do. In Web2, this is everything you do because that helps influence everything. But in Web3, it's kind of a harder thing because no one's really gone down that route. And so they would start asking these questions, asking user questions, and that really evolved into building these analytics, and being able to analyze the data that's coming in, learning the model, and also pushing forward various designs, various feedback designs to the Cosmos SDK team on how indexing should be run, how streaming should be done, and every so often when they need changes in the SDK, like everyone else who's indexing, if they ask us, like, can you emit this? Can you emit that? We kind of make a change in the SDK to accommodate it, just because it's not only going to be beneficial to that team, but to many teams as well. And that's really evolved into much more. So they help offer RPCs as well to a bunch of chains. And it's more of a B2B relationship. And now they're kind of delving into target marketing. So kind of the Google ads of crypto, in a way that if you're a user and you have X, Y, and Z, and this other chain can help you fix or optimize this asset, then there might be like a targeted ad in a wallet or something like that is put out. And so they're really merging the Web 2 world into the Web 3 world.
So it's really behavioral or user level analysis. So we're talking wallets, transactions, what's happening on the chain, not necessarily how the chain itself is doing sort of infrastructurally. Exactly. They're more focused on the activity. Yeah, I guess that's also one of the key questions this underlies or is connected to one of the key questions around Cosmos, which is how to get adoption, right? Or how to get growth. Like, how do we sort of move the needle on the ecosystem and expand in terms of number of users. Before we get to that, I'm still curious, like, so that's these, if we broadly think about Buinary builders sort of activities, Cosmos SDK dev, builders program, Numia, and how's the whole thing funded, like as a company? Like, you need, like, there's a sizable team, I guess, now, and you guys need to fund operations, am I right? And this is always in Cosmos, we know it's not super easy to sort of, get funding for the work you do. So what's the structure of the funding that you guys have?
Yeah, so the Builders Program and the Cosmos SDK are funded by the ICF. Thankfully, we're able to continue that relationship, and definitely looking forward to many years. And then Numia is entirely self-funded. So Numia has a revenue stream and it funds itself. But beyond that, there is also an avenue within the company that we do apply for grants here and there for various features or various tooling or research to do. The one caveat here is, as of right now, a lot of these grants are not like Buinary funds. So how we treat it within Buinary is we really want to enable everyone in the company to build stuff they want to have fun with and research stuff they're really interested in. And if they're able to get a grant for it, we just ask, like, hey, are you guys willing to brand it as a Buinary grant, but then all the funding would go to you. And so in this sense, like, a lot of the grants that the Atom Accelerator or the Osmosis grant system has given Buinary has usually been to the individuals. They just brand it as Buinary. And so we've done a couple of grants so far, the individuals have, and we've been fortunate enough for them to brand it as Buinary to help grow the pie for everyone, not only for certain individuals. And so that's kind of like how it's been now. I think funding in Cosmos is like it's a whole can of worms. It can go on for many days, but I think that's like the problem in the wider ecosystem. When I talk to Alexi from Aragon, he has the same problem. Like, he's like, okay, people use our tech, and then they're asking us questions, asking us debugging stuff. And then it's like, they're like, hey, like, can you guys help fund us? Everyone goes silent. And so that's like a bigger problem, not only in Cosmos. I think Protocol Guild has done some interesting stuff there. And I know the Time Wave team is like interested in bringing some form of Protocol Guild to Cosmos to help fund a lot of these public goods. And I'm hoping, like, my whole thing has always been, I don't want, like, the app chain thesis was we want 1,000 chains. And I remember when we were doing, like, when the ICF was interviewing each product owner, like, what do you guys want in 5 years? And I remember so many people were saying 1,000 chains, 1,000 chains. And this was, I believe, right after the Dragonberry. So actually I think not today, but like around this time is 1 year since Dragonberry happened last year. So like the huge potential hack that could have happened that we were able to fix in time. And so I don't want 1,000 chains. It's like the goal is actually for me, it's like I want 5 chains who have a treasury or a foundation as big or bigger than the ICF that are willing to help push the stack and the ecosystem forward. Right now, a lot of it falls on the ICF shoulders, and the ICF gets kind of like pulled through the dirt very often. And very many people are upset about things, but it is very hard to understand that without the ICF, we wouldn't have the Cosmos ecosystem. In 2020, when Cosmos was going through the great debacle, the great organizational restructuring, if certain people had their way and the ICF had to give up all their atoms, then probably the ICF would need to shut down by now. And then the question would come, like, who would be funding the public goods? How would the Cosmos ecosystem continue? And so it's really like, how do we build sustainability for the Cosmos ecosystem in the long run, that we're not only relying on a single entity, but potentially 5 that also are using the stack?
Cosmoverse just finished. Really curious what your take is on the happenings and the news that have been released around in Istanbul. What's top of mind when I say Cosmoverse?
I think everyone's top of mind is the Stride acquisition, and like everyone has their opinion, and everyone. So at last year's Cosmoverse, there was definitely a lesson learned with announcing Atom 2.0. The hub doesn't have like a founder per se, doesn't have an identity, and there was a proposal, and everyone got upset. Like, how can you do this behind closed doors? And so, hats off to Stride and the Informal team for really just saying like, hey, like, we don't know how this is going to work, but we're just proposing it because we want your help to help define how it could potentially work. Of course, immediately off the bat, people were like, how can you discuss this in private? And they were like, no, the point was that we don't. That's why we wanted to announce it with like no definition, no context. It's a super interesting like design. I think it's a bit too early. And I think that the Cosmos Hub is already has a revenue stream from Stride, and so it's already very well aligned. In my opinion, I think it could be somewhat detrimental if Stride loses its identity and just becomes a ICS chain under the Cosmos Hub, and it kind of opens the door for other liquid staking providers to become dominant in the ecosystem outside of ICS. The other part is if the hub were to acquire, then the hub's kind of not being neutral anymore. And we always know the hub as being this neutral party in the broader ecosystem. Of course, it has to give some favor to the people that are actually paying it, like Stride and Neutron. But we don't want, as Zaki said, like he wanted to design the liquid staking module in a way that the hub did not have to choose the winner. And by the hub buying Stride, it's technically choosing the winner in the liquid staking.
Sort of
so it's kind of less neutral.
Obviously, that's like a big ticket item. Let's call it. But what else do you think? What else do you think was interesting at Cosmoverse? Is there something else that caught your mind? I know this must have taken a lot of spotlight, but I guess that's not the only thing.
Cosmoverse for me is like high school reunion or like your college reunion. It's like I've been in this space for so long, and it's like you interact with so many people online and in this remote world. But then it's like Cosmoverse and Nebular are like the two places where everyone gets together and you can talk in person, and it's more humanizing between the people. And so like I always just love interacting with people in that sense. The other things that was like super interesting, I mean, Cosmoverse is like more retail oriented, so it's a lot of product announcements. And so for people who are like in Cosmos every day, then it's like a bit less exciting, I'd say, because it is like I remember watching the Union talk. And the Union thing is like super cool. And it was like announcement of like how they're doing it. But it's like, for me in my mind, it's like, oh, I want to learn like how you guys are doing it on the tech side. Like, cool, you built a product and some diagrams, but it's like, I want to understand like how the code works and stuff like this. So it's like, just my mind is on a different level than a lot of the announcements. But I mean, the Atom Economic Zone was like super interesting to see, had such fruitful discussions, and we went to a few of them. And it was an amazing display of involvement from the ecosystem, and it felt really like everyone's voice was being heard. Like Sunny came in in his Byzantine general outfit, and
Sunny's voice is always heard, no matter what. Yeah,
exactly. He came into the room and said, like, I posted on the forum that I'll put up a governance proposal for a loan of atoms to incentivize the pool and stuff like this. And then it was like the Byzantine general versus like the atom economic zone on like explaining why it makes sense and like why it makes sense to do it for osmosis and maybe less so like Astroport and stuff like this. It was just such an interesting discussion. I didn't see that many talks. I still need to go on YouTube and like watch most of the talks, but it was like, as always, like amazing to see everyone.
Perfect.
Did you go?
So let's hope. No, I wasn't there this year, unfortunately, which is I was so curious to ask. Yeah, so let's hope this spawns like lots of new projects and lots of new activities, and we're gonna get some growth in Cosmos.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely see it coming. I mean, we'll see. I think it's interesting to see like last Cosmoverse. It's the cycles basically. It's like 2 years ago, it was like you could raise money building on Polkadot. A year ago, you could raise money just by saying Cosmos. This year, you could raise money just by saying Optimism. Next year, what is it going to be? And it's really interesting to see these cycles because then once the cycle passes you really have to hunker down and identify and find your identity and find your product. Otherwise, you're going to get left behind.
Absolutely. Amen. All right. That was a fun chat. Thanks very much for coming back on, Marko.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
Have a good one.